I think it's harder to be good at everything. So guys who do eyes, nose, face, breast, body, it's harder to be good. Doesn't mean it's impossible to be good at all of them. You'd have to have good training and be a good surgeon.
Hello and welcome to Beauty in the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. So today's special guest is Dr. Philip Solomon. He's a facial plastic cosmetic surgeon in private practice in Toronto, Canada, and he's been practicing over 25 years now. He's also established the Solomon Nasal and Facial Plastic Surgery Center in Thornhill, which is just north of Toronto. Now, he's certified in otolaryngology, head and neck surgery by the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons in Canada, as well as certified by the American Board of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. Dr. Solomon speaks at medical conferences. He's been featured in major media outlets and has more than 650 YouTube videos. And he and his co-host Nancy Hyper, also his operations manager, have their own podcast called Unfiltered, where they talk about the latest trends in facial aesthetics and what really goes on and what goes into surgical transformation. Now, he also interviews industry experts, so I was on his podcast recently talking about what cosmetic patients want, and I'll be sure to put that link in our notes so you can check that out. Dr. Solomon, welcome to Beauty in the Biz. I'm so glad to finally have you on.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. So we always like to start with, after you're done with all the training and maybe you did a fellowship or not, what happens next? What was your journey to private practice? Was it a jagged road or was it straight in? You were just going private.
Mine was more of a hybrid. I was going right in terms of setting up an aesthetic practice, but I was also working part-time at the University of Toronto in the teaching program for otolaryngology and the Division of Facial Plastic Surgery. And I also was working at a community hospital in the north end of the city, where I ultimately became chief of surgery and got involved in hospital politics for a number of years. So I wore a number of different hats. So that was in the first decade. I sort of fell into a lot of that, where I was doing head and neck surgery and aesthetic practice in my own private facility. And I set up my own operating room and private facility probably within the first 10 years of practice. So the first 10 years was really a trampoline into many different arenas. And I felt like I was a little bit spread thin because I was trying to do a bit too much, I think. Now, I held on to all three of those hats: academic, facial plastic surgery with teaching and residents and fellows. I continued to do some head and neck surgery, primarily endocrine type surgery and salivary tumors and skin cancers, and then was slowly building up my aesthetic practice, which fortunately was relatively busy right away, but obviously got busier and busier as my practice evolved. And probably around 5 to 10 years ago, I started cutting back on different things. So currently my practice is 100% aesthetic, and I no longer work at an academic hospital, but I still held on to a community hospital, which is near my office, just in case we have a need to send a patient there.
So when you went out on your own, did you rent? Did you buy? How did you set up your practice?
I initially set up a practice with a colleague who was a plastic surgeon and another facial plastic surgeon who was near middle age at that stage. And we shared an office for a number of years. And then ultimately, everyone went in their own directions due to other multiple factors. And we all stayed friends. But I ended up buying my own facility and employing my own staff and decided to have total control over my practice.
Nice. I used to do some speaking in Canada, and you had a lot more vigorous, regulations there when it came to like ORs or even marketing. But did you get your own OR? Was it a big deal? Was permitting a big deal?
It was a bit of a big deal, but it was actually during the time period where a lot of things were changing in Ontario. That's the province that Toronto's located in. And each province regulates their out-of-hospital facilities. So they're called OHPs, out-of-hospital premises. And there's different levels from level 1, which is like local anesthesia, minor procedures, to level 3. We ended up applying for level 3. The regulations of level 3 honestly rolled out during the first 10 years of my practice. due to an adverse outcome at a non-plastic surgeon who was doing aesthetic medicine out of her practice. So she was foreign trained. It was in the media. She was only licensed as a family doctor in Canada, but she had a bad surgical outcome, which led to a lot of pressure on the college to regulate tighter in terms of not only facilities, but scope of practice. So I ended up being on the regulatory body's representative for otolaryngology, facial plastics, and we set out what would be reasonable scope of practice for our specialty, everything in the collarbone up, for reconstructive and aesthetic surgery. There were plastic surgeons on that committee, dermatologists on that committee, ophthalmologists, oculoplastics, and we sort of set out standards for what would be considered scope of practice and what would be considered a change of scope of practice, meaning doctors working outside of their traditional training. And there are processes in place by the college now for doctors who wish to change their scope of practice. And then there were similarly lots of regulation regarding facilities, including audits. I'm sure it's similar to many states in the United States, but every 5 years we have an auditor come. It could be usually it's a team of nurse physicians, anesthesiologists, and surgeons to inspect, go over policy and procedure manuals, physical plant, and a lot of paperwork and stuff like that to make sure that you're up to standard. So I think it's pretty it's well regulated. Some doctors felt it was almost over-regulated. I think it's sort of trying to find that sweet spot. But it does make us all stay pretty current to make sure that we're up to standards, because none of us want to have our facilities sort of shut down or anything like that.
I know here in the States, it's getting more popular to do in-house procedures. So if you don't have an OR, you're doing like IV sedation or awake procedures. Are you on that bandwagon, or where are you at with that in Canada?
Well, level 3, you can do everything. So we do general anesthesia and IV sedation and local. We do all of the above. We give patients different options depending on what procedure and what their needs are. Some facilities are, rated a level 2, meaning they're doing IV sedation, not GA. They may be more limited in the types of procedures that they can offer at that facility. There's a number of new facilities sort of popping up in Ontario. Ontario's been always it's a public healthcare system. And then the private stuff sort of worked out of the public system often. And then private facilities were really set up by individual doctors. Now there's some corporations setting up some private facilities throughout the province, and they're hiring physicians to be their physician leads. So there's sort of 3 categories. There's hospital-based surgery, where you still can potentially do operations of cosmetic procedures. But I think surgeons who have a busy cosmetic practice typically will either have their own facility or rent off another physician. It's very difficult nowadays to run a full-scale plastic surgery aesthetic type of practice out of a hospital.
For sure. What about bringing more people on? It looks like, do you have another surgeon or an associate with you? And if so, what's that relationship?
We've had a few doctors rent our OR from time to time. Usually it's people that I'm friends with in the industry who don't have their own facilities, who do IV sedation primarily, but occasionally want to have a place to do GA. Like I have a colleague who's a close friend of mine who's an oculoplastic surgeon. Someone like him has his own facility for eyelid surgery, which he does primarily under sedation, but the odd patient may want to do it under GA. So someone like that I would rent to, but I haven't got a significant relationship like on a regular basis. So that would be sort of one-offs. I do have an associate for hair transplantation, which we offer at our facility, and that's sort of a partnership. And that's been very busy and doing well over the last 5 years. So that's sort of a separate business run within my facility, branded differently. It's called follicle.ca. Dr. Mark Corman's my partner in that business, and we have a different team of technicians that come in. So I feel like hair is the one thing that I've been able to sort of have as a separate business within our facility. But I haven't added in like a dermatologist or a general plastic surgeon who does body work, although it's been something that I've contemplated, but I need to find, I guess, the right person.
Gotcha. What about, do you still have that other location for rhinos?
Sorry, I missed that. The second location you asked
You
about?
still have that second location, and it seems to be focused on nose.
Well, both our facilities are focused on facial plastic surgery. I do have two facilities, and that's just for location. So I have one near downtown Toronto. We have a area that's called the Yorkville area. That area has a lot of plastic surgeons. That'd be like, I guess, in New York City, being on Park Avenue or being in Beverly Hills. So in Toronto, being in Yorkville is kind of the destination place for aesthetic medicine. But my main facility, where I have my surgical facility, is uptown, sort of in the first suburb north of the city. It's really easy to access. We have lots of parking. It's off a number of major highways and subway lines. So why would I have two? It was sort of probably an ego purchase. I just wanted to have a downtown location. And also, I live midtown Toronto, and the traffic's becoming horrendous in Toronto. So some days it's nice to be close to work.
Right. I've noticed as surgeons get older, they like to shorten their commutes. It's a lot less wear and tear on their mental and physical health.
So I visited a colleague in New York City recently and was spending a day hanging out with him in his OR, and he started like crazy early. I thought like 6 a.m. everyone was there, and I said, "Why do you start so early?" And he said, "Just to avoid traffic." He said that if he leaves at that time, it's like 10 minutes from home. If he comes for 9 a.m., it's like an hour and a half. So it was, I guess, as the cities get busier and busier, your decisions on what time you want to start and run your practice change as well.
For sure. Now, you also have a lot of non-surgical. How many providers, or what's that makeup about? Because now you've got to manage not just the surgical profit center that you have and the different locations, but now also the different providers.
Yeah, so we have estheticians, laser technicians. We have nurses who are trained in aesthetic medicine, those that do PRP, injectable toxins and filler. I've had a number of nurse injectors for many, many years. Some, unfortunately, have gone off on their own. Some people come here and they get started in the business, get trained, get comfortable, maybe learn areas of anatomy that they weren't necessarily comfortable treating before they came here. And then they become sort of experts in the field within the nurse injector world. And sometimes it's hard to keep those people. So one of my main injectors was here over 10 years, set up her own practice, and she's quite successful. And we're still close. I mean, it didn't really get in the way of our friendship, but obviously it's hard when you have staff come and then leave. I had another nurse downtown Toronto at that office go on her own as well. She's been sort of on and off working for me for over 15 years, but she just felt that she wanted to put her hat in the ring of running her own business. So sometimes it's people want to do their own thing and then they may live to regret it. Other people, I guess it was in the cards for them that it was sort of a plan all along that they wanted to work for someone for a while, get experience, and then go off on their own. But I think that's one of the big challenges of this business in general is you have to find someone who's comfortable, who's ambitious enough and hardworking enough to make your practice successful and give the best care to your patients, but then maintaining those staff, keeping them happy so that they're not going to necessarily leave and go on their own is also a challenge.
Frankly, we like to do it the other way around. I would rather they have gone out in the real world and been beat up, and then like they realize, oh my gosh, I do not want to run a business, because it's a whole different ballgame. They think they're just going to inject. No, they're not. They have to learn marketing and business and leadership and management and social media and all of that. I like it better when they've been humbled, quite frankly. Yeah.
Well, I'll keep it in mind next time that I do some recruiting.
Well, how painful is it when a really good nurse injector, like the one who was there 10 years, when she leaves, is it palpable that she took everyone with her? Or is it like just a little blurb for you, a little blip, or is it a big deal?
I wouldn't say it's a little blip. It's a sort of something you have to manage and sort of be able to react to in a good way. I mean, some patients follow the provider because they get comfortable with that provider.
Oh, sure. I've done it myself several times. I'll follow the provider.
I mean, fortunately, the provider that did leave, at least one of them, was somewhat respectful and made an effort not to go actively after our client base. But some people nowadays people can find you easily just online. The one provider I'm referring to moved quite a distance, so I think it was sort of reasonable. Like patients, we do draw from that area as well, surgical patients, but the non-surgical patients maybe would have dispersed anyways. When I first started practice, patients, like I would see a patient who we did a facelift or rhinoplasty on, and they would, if they said they were going somewhere else for an injectable filler or Botox, I'd be all offended. And nowadays, it's like almost like common conversation. They're like, "Oh, when can I get my Botox from my provider after my facelift?" And I don't really give it too much thought anymore. I mean, sometimes we encourage them to stick with our practice, but some people are traveling distances for surgery that they wouldn't travel for non-surgical stuff. So we're sort of understanding of that. That's partially why we have the two locations. So if we see someone from downtown, they come up to our north office, have the surgery, but they can maintain the follow-up with our downtown office.
I guarantee you have a group of patients that would love to stay under your one roof if they can. Definitely the locals, but as a busy professional, I'm not dying to move around a lot. I just want to find the providers I like, the practice I like. They treat me well. They don't make me wait. They're, smooth processes. I give them my surgery and my non-surgical, I think a lot of people want to be under one roof if someone takes good care of them. Yeah.
I think so. I think they get confidence and trust in your practice, and but though you have to sort of distinguish yourself from other medi spas. For the non-surgical stuff, the only thing that the surgical offices and the dermatologists can offer is that they have more expertise, more training, or that they can manage complications better. But separate from that, because the the delta, the difference between the injectors has narrowed with extra training over decades. People have there's a lot of clinics that have good injectors. The one thing that can distinguish it is that we can combine therapies. So, not everyone can combine as well as physicians who maybe have all the surgical stuff, all the non-surgical stuff, including energy devices and the fillers, biostimulants, and Botox. So I don't know. I find some clinics in the States, maybe just the way they're set up, and in Canada, they may just want to do one thing really well and refer everything out and build out a good platform of referrals coming in, but they won't hold on to anything. We have to deal with that too. If we get a referral from a trusted colleague who's a dermatologist, we try our best to send the patient back to them because we want to maintain good relations. But patients are coming to us directly, not through the medical community, and they're finding us. We obviously want to hold on to them and give them whatever we can to maintain them, but occasionally they'll ask for services that we don't offer, and we'll refer them out to whoever we think's best at that service as well. So ultimately, we want the patient care to be paramount, and then maintaining relationships with colleagues secondarily as well.
The smartest practices know a big part of their practice growth comes from retention, referrals, and repeat treatments, not just from new internet stranger leads. That's why I created the KISS Loyalty Club, a done-for-you system that keeps your patients returning, referring, reviewing, sharing you on social media, and completing surgery. Discover how KISS can grow your own practice revenues by visiting kissloyalty.com today.
So you've got a nice practice there. You have the surgical center, you have the non-surgical, you have the hair, you have 2 locations, I think 2 or 3. What's been the biggest challenge of playing at that level?
Biggest challenge is, I think, the busier you get in this industry. One is HR, like maintaining good staff and dealing with office drama and politics, which we can talk about. Second biggest challenge is the busier you are, you almost become vulnerable because you may end up getting more of the complex cases coming your way. And some of those cases may be not fun to deal with. I mean, you can always turn them away, but then sometimes you're sort of fighting your own ego that you want to maintain, work that comes your way and offer them the best service you can. But sometimes you live to regret it and take on cases maybe you would have preferred not to deal with as well. So I think the busiest surgeons in every jurisdiction probably sees the most challenging work out there. And then there's maintaining their brand and their own reputation. The busier you are, the more people are going to love you, but the more people may not like you as well. And with the online sharing, you may end up getting, reputational damage if you're too busy as well. So I've had colleagues who are super busy surgeons who had bad reputations who I thought were really, really good surgeons. I'd seen them operate, but they weren't being cautious on their how selective they were with bringing patients in. So every year we have a meeting, maybe twice a year, and we talk about selection criteria for intake of patients, because we are busy, but we almost want to be delicate on who we turn away, but cautious on who we bring on board as well.
I completely agree. And a lot of times you have to let go of what you used to like to do, but it's just not who you are now. I've watched so many surgeons still try to get into the Mohs and the scar revisions, and I don't want to turn anyone away. But then you're back to the quantity game instead of the quality game. So there's no true answer here. It's complicated. What would you say is one of the biggest mistakes you made that others could learn from?
I think probably not focusing in on a few specific procedures. I mean, I thought I did, but in hindsight, I probably could have been even more focused earlier on, and spreading myself a little bit thin in terms of the type of practice I ran. While I found it helped me evolve as a surgeon by doing different types of things, I probably did it 5 to 10 years too long. So probably, although nowadays I see some surgeons coming out of fellowship and immediately going into the hardcore aesthetic arena, and they have absolutely zero interest whatsoever of doing some of the other procedures that they may have trained in residency, which is fine. I just found it's definitely a shift. Whereas most of the people my generation would do sort of a broader range of things that they trained in, one, to make a living until they got busy, and two, aesthetic medicine took time to build up. You couldn't become an overnight success with marketing or online stuff. It probably took 5 to 10 years to get busy with that. So whereas you potentially can get busy within a few years if you're well trained, have a good setup, and have a good online presence. So we've seen that phenomenon more than we ever did 20 years ago, for sure.
I still think you need multiple years to grow a thriving practice. I don't think it happens overnight. Quite a few of the younger people, you're right, they came in and said, I'm not doing ENT. I'm not doing any insurance. I'm going straight to facelifts and rhinos. And I think, wow, okay. But then often a lot of them have part-time jobs, trying to make money while they're making this new branding of I'm a facial specialist, it's not easy to do, and it takes a minute.
I'm sure it's more competitive than I realized. That we hear of the successes, and all of us online seem to be doing pretty well, especially people with mature practices. But I think I maybe mentioned to you recently, I had a couple surgeons reach out who had moved to the United States wanting to work part-time in Canada, and I was sort of surprised to hear that. And they basically said that it is more competitive to get busy than. They almost said there was a few people who were super busy in each jurisdiction, each city, and then there were a lot of people in a competitive range just below that, and it takes a while. So that was sort of more in line with what my expectations would have been.
For sure. By the way, how competitive is it in your area? Toronto's kind of like our LA or Miami, or what's Toronto like, and what's the competition like?
I think it's less than those cities, but it's becoming like those cities. So Toronto's really grown into one of the biggest, it's one of the biggest cities in North America by population. I think it's like New York, LA, Toronto, population wise. I think that the training in Canada, like to become a qualified surgeon in Canada, you'd have to train in Canada. And it was more difficult to move to Canada, surprisingly, if you trained abroad. So if you went and did a residency in the United States and had done medical school in the United States or in England or in Ireland, you may be qualified and good surgeon, but maybe actually you were caught between immigration rules and training and credentialing rules. So it's sort of like the population of aesthetic surgeons seemed to be quite stable for a long time. And now they've sort of loosened up on some of the regulations because there's a doctor shortage or presumed doctor shortage in Canada. Also, there's way more training programs at a fellowship level for aesthetic surgery, both in plastics and in facial plastic surgery and in ocular plastic surgery. So there's more and more people who are graduating who are seeking out those types of training programs. So I would say it's becoming more competitive. I don't think it's like oversaturated. Like I've heard some parts of the world are oversaturated, but I could see it sort of heading that way. We have a number of well-trained surgeons who graduated at the University of Toronto from my program that I work at, and some of them went on to do fellowships in the United States. What a couple of them are there right now in Los Angeles, and I've heard that some of them want to come back to Toronto. And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes them to get busy here. I'm not sure if I would move back to Canada so quickly if I had trained in facial plastic surgery. I stayed because I had family reasons, and back then I thought Toronto was an amazing city, which I still do. But there was kind of lists you'd have in your head of the advantages of living in Canada versus the United States, and that list isn't quite as robust a list as it used to be, because some of the same negatives that the United States may have been plagued with are now present in Canada. Like, we used to be able to say, oh, we have gun control, and we have no violent crime, and we can leave our doors open, and Toronto's super safe. And it's not really that way anymore. I don't want to bash it on this podcast, but the truth is we've had like liberal governments in for over a decade, and we've had huge immigration into Canada, and our crime rate's gone through the roof. I think we're one of the biggest car theft capitals in the world, and I don't see it ending soon. People are buying private security to protect their cars and their houses. There's home invasions. So those are the negative things about Toronto that I grew up here. I've lived here most of my life. None of that was sort of the character of Toronto that I grew up in. But Toronto's a multicultural giant city with a huge population now, so comes with more complex problems. There's also a lot of people here that live here part-time. Often they're from other parts of the world and they're a wealthy class. And some of those patients will do aesthetic surgery while they're spending time in Canada. Often they have kids like in university here and things like that. Like I'll do facelifts on patients or rhinoplasties on Saudis, Kuwaitis, Qatari patients from the Middle East. We've had quite a few people who are visiting for a few years from England. And some who've come up here with relocation for job within North America as well. So we have sort of a growing element of that where people are expats from other areas and want to do their procedures while they're living here.
Wait, and you don't do surgery on them?
No, we do. In the past, it was more complicated because of insurance issues, but now we have private insurance that covers us to work on patients from all over the world.
Okay. You and I had talked about that. In Canada, people are so used to the insurance taking care of things, and then because the medicine you want to do the fun side of medicine where it's cash only. And we love financing here in America. I don't know if you guys do as much as we do, but that's usually how people are paying for it. Not, I should say usually. Quite a few patients want this. Everybody seems to want cosmetic surgery, but can they afford it? And so financing is a big deal down here, or can be. I don't think it's as popular, or is it in Canada?
It's growing here. So it's been around for most of my career. There were really only two finance companies, and one of them wasn't doing great, and the other one's been quite successful. I think they fund or provide finances to dentistry, like private dentistry, cosmetic surgery, and some other services like that. There's a new one on the block, I think, called Beautify, and they're offering patients 0% financing. But it basically, the physician pays for it on the other end, but it looks seductive to the patient. The physician may raise the fee and then charge them 0% financing to offset it. But that's kind of I think it's a strategic model to sort of make the procedure seem affordable to people. So I think less in the States, but it's definitely a growing thing that we see here. It's usually for, in my practice, more for younger patients wanting to get rhinoplasty done. The patients doing aging face and like facelift procedures are usually more mature and usually have budgeted for it.
I would take a look at the numbers on that before you decide if it makes sense or not, because too many surgeons say, I'm not paying that fee, but then you miss the big fee. Like you missed all of it then, So I would just take a look at the numbers. When I offer financing, am I closing more procedures? And or am I still leaving money on the table by saying we don't offer financing? The numbers will tell you the answer to that. Speaking of numbers, you have pricing on your website, which I love, but you're also a mature practice, and you can do that. You can say what you want, but what was your theory about that? And when did you start putting pricing on your website? And what kind of feedback do you get from the patients?
So it's sort of a double-edged sword. Pricing in the industry is interesting because, you know, if you're priced too low, it's a problem. If you're priced too high, it's a different problem. We've tried to always position ourselves as sort of mid to upper market pricing with high level surgery, you know, but sometimes you almost feel like some of the procedures that you offer pricing for need to be reevaluated on a more regular basis. So there's definitely been price inflation throughout our economy, the US economy, and some of the prices have just gone through the roof for certain procedures. But you don't want to look like you're the cheapest guy if you forget to up your prices. So we've sort of done price reviews. So the reason I mentioned that is when we post prices online, and if we start raising our prices, which we've had to, because some of our costs have gone up dramatically from anesthesiologists, nursing, drugs, everything. If we don't update it quick enough, then some people will phone and say, oh, I saw it was this, and you've now saying it's that. And we get into a whole discussion. The entire reason that I put it on out there in the first place was we were getting a lot of phone calls for prices, and I felt like it was just wasting staff's time. And so I thought maybe if I put it out there, it would reduce the number of phone calls just inquiring about prices, and that the patients who did make consults with us knew the price information before wasting their time with a consult if it was something that was out of their league. The other problem we have is that we offer almost, I think, too many procedures. So within facial plastic surgery, it seems like there's only a handful of procedures, but we offer variations of procedures. So for instance, blepharoplasty, I'll offer like upper and lower blepharoplasty. You'd say, okay, that's simple enough. But then we offer upper and lower with fat grafting as a separate fee. In my opinion, not 100% of patients need fat grafting, but a significant percentage do need fat grafting. So I've been debating this with colleagues who do it, and they're like, just charge one fee, and whether you do fat grafting or not, it's up to you. But then you have some people who can't afford the fee with the fat grafting, and they probably would look pretty good without the fat grafting. So do you lose those clients because you've raised your fee to a higher number than was within their budget? So we're sort of playing around with some of those things, but I think sometimes it creates some complexity too. So we'll do CO2 laser resurfacing as one option for eyelid rejuvenation. We'll do blepharoplasty as another option for eyelid rejuvenation. We'll do CO2, blepharoplasty, and fat grafting as probably the most common combination that we do for eyelid rejuvenation. And they'll all have different pricing. And then each procedure will have different pricing, sort of in that range. Facelifts, we try to keep one fee, but then combining fees like they're doing a brow lift, blepharoplasty, facelift, and maybe fat grafting maybe will be a different fee where we sort of discount some of the secondary fees. Some of the fees in the US just blow my mind. I mean, I'm just thinking like, wow, I'm really living in the wrong location because I'm like probably one of the busiest surgeons in the country for a long time, and I do pretty well. But then when I see how hard I work, like I'm doing hundreds and hundreds of cases a year, which is great. Like my fellows love it because they get massive experience for rhinoplasty and facelifts and eyes, but we work pretty hard. And I'm not saying that American doctors don't work hard. I think all doctors work super hard. It just, sometimes I see the fees being posted in the hundreds of thousands. I'm just like, wow, I'd be a gazillionaire if I had my volume with those prices. And I guess there are some guys like that have similar volumes of those
There
prices.
are many though, honestly. The ones the heavy hitters like that, they make a big deal out of it. It's become an ego thing down here. And I mean, not everyone does that and not everyone wants that. You know, I just spoke to somebody the other day who's very, very booked out for like 2.5 years. And he said, but I don't want to work with only the rich. I want to work with normal patients, you know? So it's all in what you're trying to accomplish. But I guarantee they're an anomaly. That is not normal what they're doing. Yeah. But let me ask you this regarding when it comes to advertising or marketing, because you're really a good marketer, but you have two very distinct target markets. You know, typically it's a younger rhino patient or an aging face mature patient. So how do you do it? You just have two completely different campaigns?
Because I think that you've hit the nail on the head with some of our challenges for my practice, because it's very tough to market multiple procedures and look like an expert in both. When I was starting, you'd be an expert if you just did face. So you did nose, eyes, face. And now it's sort of like there's guys who say, oh, I only do nose. You know, the guys who only do nose better at noses than guys who do eye, nose, face. I mean, you can be good at, I think you can be good at all three of those procedures, and you may want to have a mixed practice. I think it's harder to be good at everything. So guys who do eyes, nose, face, breast, body, it's harder to be good. Doesn't mean it's impossible to be good at all of them. You'd have to have good training and be a good surgeon. It's certainly possible. There are guys out there that are good at all of those things. So I think it's harder to, the more things you do, it's harder to market expertise in it, I guess. So that's one of the challenges. So I'd say in the first 15 years of my practice, it was like heavy rhinoplasty volume. For the last decade, it's been heavy facelift and anti-aging surgery. And I like noses. I don't want to give up noses, but I think we did switch gears on marketing a little bit towards the aging face. I think partially because we were just very busy with noses because we've been doing it for so long. I think our nose volume is still very busy, but it's definitely not as busy as it was when I was only doing noses. Part of me accepts that. I think like it's fine because I there's only so much work you can do in a given week, and I like having a bit of a mixture. And I think it may keep the creativity a little bit flowing. I think when you're doing like factory work of just mass volume of noses or one procedure alone, while you become a real expert in it, sometimes it can become a bit repetitive and a bit boring too. So sometimes you may not be at your top of your game because you're doing just one thing day in, day out. So I find and it's individual. I find I'm most creative when I'm doing a few different procedures. I like doing my day, like today, I did a facelift, brow lift, rhinoplasty, and a blepharoplasty. So it was a very, very busy day, but I covered sort of the full gamut of things that I really like to do.
Right. So when it comes to marketing channels, you're very, very good at being in all of them. You've done a good job with website copy and SEO for organic because you have so much copy. Although that's going to diffuse a lot now that AI is on board. They're not going to care as much about your copy because anybody could have written that. But you've been so good about the videotaping. So you have killer videos, lots of social media. You've been at that a while. You also used to get a lot of PR. What's working right now to get your name out there? What's working?
I think it's usually a combination of things. I think some of the things that we've done in the past, we've sort of just done because we sort of enjoyed it. And I'm always open-minded if someone approaches me within the industry who wants to provide something new and it sounds like we could benefit from it, or something that I would find fun, like a photo shoot for a magazine, I would find fun to do, or at least try it out. So I used to sort of say yes to most things, and then we would suss out what worked for us and then stick with it. So the most recent thing was we were approached to do a podcast. We ended up being as you mentioned earlier, that Unfiltered series. And in Canada, there weren't a lot of plastic surgery podcasts. So we talked just frankly, kind of like we're doing right now, and you were on it. So I think it's sort of a refreshing, easy, chill thing to do. We do it with a professional filming crew so that we can make it as, meaningful to the audience who's taking the time to listen to us. We edit out a little bit here and there. But most of it's sort of free flowing, just with different guests or me talking with patients that we've operated on. And I think those are really helpful for patients to sort of get a sense of whether they want to work with me as their chosen surgeon. It gives them a sense of what other patients' experiences were like. So those are probably the most organic type of marketing, like you're actually seeing examples of our work and hearing from our patients. So I like doing those. We do those also on Instagram, where we may do little videos asking people how they're recovering. So I think those are probably my favorite type of marketing, more so than just adding pictures to our website or new copy, even though that used to be sort of essential so people could find you.
Are you able to track your results? Can you tell if they came from the podcast versus TikTok post?
I'm not sure I can. Probably our marketing team that we work with can. They have told us that our podcast performs really well and was ranked. I don't know if you type in plastic surgery podcast and you're in Canada, I think it shows up like very high in the top 1 or 2 podcasts for that type of podcast. So I'm not sure if it would show up in the United States as favorably because there's probably so many competitors.
No, I guarantee you, those people like you who have their pole in a lot of different ponds, like you have a podcast and it's a consumer podcast, which makes so much sense. So many surgeons interview other surgeons, so they're talking to surgeons like I do, but my audience is surgeons. I don't know why you wouldn't have a podcast talking about consumers and having consumer guests on talking about their experience. That just makes a lot of sense to me. But when they start interacting with you, they start watching and they start leaving comments, and then you send them over to your Instagram, and their Instagram sends them over to your website. It's that synergy of you connecting these all together, and synergistically Google says, oh wow, they're really popular, in lots of different formalities or formats. That's how you win. That's how you win right now in SEO and Google search and ChatGTP. By the way, have you heard your patients saying that yet? I heard about you on ChatGTP. It's coming.
Yeah, we've had a few people say that.
Yeah. So interesting. By the way, do you have any tips on how you get so many of your patients to show their faces and give you photo consents and video consents? Because you're doing a really good job with that too. Any secrets?
I don't think we have a ton of secrets. I'll be honest with you. I'd say some of our best results I haven't been able to share, and I find it very, very hard. Some doctors have said that they won't operate on people unless they have licensure to use their images. I've never taken a hard line like that. I'd say that probably only 30% to 40% of our patients are agreeable. Some people want to be on it and be featured. Some people are very shy. The nose patients are more agreeable than the facelift patients in Canada, just because of the demographic, I think, are more comfortable sharing. Some of the older patients find it a little bit, they're not familiar with it or maybe nervous, although that seems like it's changing. Our younger facelift patients, again, it's two categories. Some of them want to show that they've been gutsy enough to do it, and others have been or don't want anyone to know they had anything done. So you get into these dilemmas. I've had like one person who was on our podcast, and we interviewed her. I'd done a rhinoplasty on, and then she called and said she didn't want us to air it because she had a stalker. So we didn't air that one. And it was one of my favorite podcasts we did. Maybe we'll air it. She says she's still working through that, but it was sort of, you get all sorts of different scenarios. We've had some people, we've put their images up on our website, and then a couple of years go by and they phone us and say, can you please take them down? I got a new job. I don't want anyone knowing that I had my nose done. So we run into different situations. We're always sort of agreeable. If someone asks us to do something, we comply. We're not looking to upset anyone. So we only use images if patients have been happy enough to share them.
Yeah.
We do consent forms too. Like we consent on our regular consent form. It's one of the items on our regular consent for surgery. So it'll say you agree to this, 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 and this. One of the items will be I agree to photo consent forms for use for social media, marketing, whatever. They have the option of saying they don't agree. It's not going to prohibit surgery, but at least we can go back and refer to that. And then when we see people after surgery who seem happy and we have good before and afters, we may ask them, and then we'll frequently refer back to the original consent, or sometimes we'll have them sign another consent form just relating to that.
Well, I've been doing an informal survey on the aging face patients, and even the big hitters say 1 out of 10 will give me permission. And they say the secret is to just do a whole bunch of surgery and ask a whole bunch of people, and hopefully they will. So if you're getting 30%, you're way ahead of the game. So congratulations. Yeah.
Maybe that number's off the top of my head. I think 30% of people are open-minded to sharing. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to share, but I think what you see with our practice is that we put a ton of before and afters out, mostly because we're busy. So we've been doing hundreds and hundreds of cases for years and years and years. So we have a lot of content to work with, which I think sort of gives us one of the few competitive advantages that we can draw from, is that we've been busy doing it for a long time.
For sure. So we're going to wind it down now. Please tell me a crazy patient or staff story you care to share.
Oh my God, I have a lot of stories about staff and patients, but some of them will get me into trouble, so it's a little bit trickier. Let me just think for a second. We mentioned stalkers. I've had a number of stalkers as patients. I had one patient many years ago who had been a patient for some time and sort of became obsessed with dealing with some issue. I'll say some potential medical issue, and I'll do my best to manage it. But the amount of communication became excessive. And I don't know why. It's not even that funny a story. I just found it amusing only because I was like finding the patient was like getting a bit much, and I was like having to make it more difficult to sort of see them in consultation because it would take hours each time they'd arrive. And then one day I got a phone call I was at the hospital working, and I got a phone call from an unknown number, and I picked up the phone, and it was the patient, but I think I'd phoned the patient and not blocked my number, so she had my number. And I picked up the phone, and then I turned my head while I was like going to get like coffee, and I turned my head, and they were on a payphone because it was back in the day of payphones. They were on a payphone down the hall, phoning me at the hospital. I just like for you, it was like kind of freaky. Anyway, that was one story that comes to mind.
That's
In
crazy.
terms of staff, I have lots of staff. I think the comedy of my staff is primarily related to the fact that the majority of them are all women. And I don't know, other surgeons who watch your show probably would agree that managing an office filled with women in this industry may be challenging, and there's usually some drama going on in the background. So they would argue that I contribute to the drama. I do have a little bit of a warped sense of humor, but I have to sort of caution myself now of like to avoid the drama, because I think it's like I can step into drama pretty much at any moment. So I'll leave it at that. I can tell you more specific drama humor next time I see you.
All right. Last question. Tell us something interesting we don't know about you.
I don't know. I feel like I'm mostly a workaholic. I don't even know if I'm that interesting anymore. All I do is seem to work lately. I don't know. I'm married, have two boys. One's 22, one's 19. They're both in university. I try to stay active, like when I'm not working. I like travel a lot. I wish I traveled more. I hate traveling, but I like being away, but I hate the process getting to places. I took my kids to Africa a few years ago because I was born in South Africa. We had a fantastic trip. We went 3 families. That was one of the best trips I've had with family. It was terrific. What else? I bike ride a fair bit. I've gone on a number of excursion bike rides in the last 15 years to different parts of the world to bike. And what else? I'm an avid World War II history buff, so I really like World War II history for whatever reason. So whenever there's documentaries or books on World War II, I tend to gravitate to wanting to up my knowledge base. And I'm also, I think, a closet sort of biblical historian. I like archaeology stories about the Middle East, and there's a couple on YouTube that I seem to be a little bit focused on lately, where I'm learning bits and bobs where they try to tie in stories of the First and Second Testament to archaeologic finds. So I find that interesting too. That's about it. Otherwise, I'm pretty boring.
I love I hope your kids appreciated the trip to South Africa. Not many kids get that kind of perspective. Did they love it?
Yeah, they love that trip. That trip's like a must. If you can do it, especially with family, it's sort of a must. Anywhere in Africa where there's safari is definitely worth, I think, taking your family.
Do you think any of the kids are going to follow in your footsteps?
My younger son wants to do what I do. He's hoping to one day join my practice, and I can retire and give it to him. So that's his goal. We'll see if he changes his mind. He's only in second year university, but he does seem pretty motivated right now.
Nice. Oh, let's do that, because a lot of the kids today say, "I don't want to work as hard as you did." Good for you.
Yeah, he did not want to work as hard, but I think he just. I said to him, "I don't have a business to give you unless you do what I do," and then he goes, "Okay, I guess I'll do that." So, but he seems legitimately focused on it. So he has reason to want to do medicine. I think he has. We have a bunch of family members who are in healthcare or medicine, and I think he looks up to it. He had 2 uncles who were dentists, myself, my sister-in-law is a doctor, so I think he's sort of surrounded by it, and I think he thinks it's good. He also had some minor medical issues which required surgery when he was really young, so I think he got freaked out by that, which probably made him thankful for the care he got. He had some bone tumor, which thankfully ended up being benign. So I think all these little things can influence how you end up in medicine. Like I broke my leg when I was 12, and I was in old-fashioned traction for 2 months which I broke my femur. And I think that probably impacted me wanting to be a doctor.
So many surgeons that have been on the podcast started out with an incident as a kid, and they just were hooked. They couldn't believe the transformation that they went through, and then they wanted to become a surgeon as well. So your website is SolomonFacialPlastic.com, and so is your Instagram, Solomon Facial Plastic. And that is going to wrap it up for us today, everybody. Dr. Solomon, thank you so much. And anybody, if you would, do me a favor, if you like what you heard, if you could review us and share us with your colleagues, I'd love to grow the audience even more. And then if you've got any feedback or comments for me, please leave them on my website at CatherineMaley.com, or you can certainly DM me on Instagram at CatherineMaleyMBA. And with that, I will say thank you, and we'll talk again soon.
The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want, but you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.